Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. I hope you're doing well today, maybe sipping something warm, maybe curled up somewhere cozy. Have you ever made a promise as a child that stayed in your heart, even after the years swept everything else away? Today's story is one of those rare, soul-stirring journeys of love lost in a storm and found again under the same old tree. That summer in the quiet town of Willow Edge stretched on like the golden light filtering through the trees. Beneath the park's oldest oak tree, 8-year-old Sophie Lane, her golden hair catching the sun, fair skin glowing, and bright blue eyes full of wonder, sat beside her best friend, Eli Walker. Between them lay a blank sheet of paper and a box of colored pencils. The wind stirred gently, and the leaves rustled like they were whispering secrets. "Are you sure we'll always be friends?" Sophie asked as she colored in 2 stick figures. One a blonde girl, the other a messy-haired boy. Eli nodded, his brown eyes unusually serious. "Only if you promise." "I promise too." "I promise," she said, offering her pinky. They linked fingers and then signed their names beneath the drawing. Eli's handwriting wobbled, uneven and rushed. Sophie used her mother's purple pen to curl each letter with care. Below their names, she wrote, "No matter what happens, we will always find our way back to each other." From her backpack, Sophie pulled out a mint tin, lined with a tiny embroidered handkerchief. They folded the drawing, placed it inside, and buried the box at the base of the oak. Eli pulled out his dad's pocket knife and carved a heart into the bark with S+E in the middle. "Now even the tree knows our promise," Sophie whispered, smiling. Neither of them knew that a 4-day storm was coming, and everything they knew was about to change. No one expected a spring rain to swallow an entire town. The first 3 days were harmless, gentle showers that soaked the soil and made the grass gleam, but by the 4th, the storm turned merciless. Rain poured down in sheets, nonstop. The once quiet creek that wound around Willow Edge surged into a churning river, muddy and violent. It broke its banks, flooded streets, and tore through fences. The lower neighborhoods, including where the Walker family lived, were hit hardest. Late that night, Eli woke to sirens and flashing emergency lights outside his window. Water had already crept into the downstairs hallway. "We have to go, now!" his father barked, dragging sandbags toward the door as responders knocked urgently. His mother was stuffing important papers and photo albums into waterproof bags. Eli stood frozen until she snapped, "Go upstairs, take what you need." In a daze, he ran to his room and opened his top drawer. There it was, a small wooden box, his most treasured belonging. Inside lay a beaded bracelet Sophie had made for him the previous summer. The plastic beads were scratched and faded, but the lavender thread still carried her favorite scent. He clutched it tightly, then slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. "Can I leave a note for Sophie? Just a few words," he pleaded, eyes wide. "There's no time," his mother said, gently but firmly, pushing him toward the door. As the rescue truck pulled away into the storm, Eli turned back, forehead pressed against the fogged window. Streets vanished behind curtains of rain, the park, the tree, the promise, all gone without a goodbye. Weeks passed before the floodwaters receded and roads reopened. When Sophie finally returned to Eli's neighborhood, all she found was a muddy clearing. The house was gone. No sign, no message, no trace. No one to ask, nothing to hold on to. She began writing letters to his old school, to shelters, to addresses she wasn't even sure were real. Every envelope came back marked, addressee unknown. On the 100th day after the flood, Sophie returned to the oak tree. With her father's carving knife in hand, she etched a new line beneath the heart they had once carved as children. "I'm waiting, remember our promise." And then she sat beneath its branches until dusk, listening to the wind whisper through the leaves. She waited, but no one came. 13 years had passed. To most in Willow Edge, the flood was just a distant memory, but to Sophie, it was the day a piece of her heart disappeared. She grew up carrying a quiet emptiness one no words or achievements could fill. She studied hard, became the strong, independent woman her mother always hoped for. But something inside her always felt unfinished. Every year, on the same day they had once made their childhood promise beneath the old oak, Sophie returned to the park. She'd sit in the same spot, run her fingers over the fading bark where "I'm waiting, remember our promise" had been carved. The words had blurred with time and moss, but in her heart, she remembered every letter. No one knew where she went on that day. No one understood why she still waited. Her mother did not approve. "You need to stop chasing dreams and start thinking about marriage," she would say. Over the years, she introduced Sophie to many nice, stable young men. Sophie turned them all down. Because how could she give her heart to someone else when it had never truly left that tree? She still remembered the way he had once held her hand beneath those branches, carved their names into the wood, and whispered, "No matter what happens, I'll find my way back to you." She had never forgotten that promise. And even now, she was still waiting. At 21, Sophie was everything her mother had hoped she'd become: sharp, driven, successful. She worked at her family's real estate agency, Calden & Co., the largest in Willow Edge, where she managed clients with grace and confidence. Her name was well known in town, and deals seemed to follow her wherever she went. But beneath the polished surface, Sophie often found herself staring out of her office window, wondering if there was more to life than business plans and polite smiles. There was a quiet ache that never quite went away. 13 years had passed since Eli had last set foot in Willow Edge. The flood had taken everything: his house, his childhood, his best friend. But it hadn't taken the promise he had made, and it certainly hadn't taken Sophie from his heart. He stepped off the bus with little more than a duffel bag, a job offer from an architecture firm nearby, and a small wooden box tucked deep in his coat pocket, the same box that held the lavender-scented bracelets Sophie had given him so long ago. As he walked the familiar streets, now slightly different and modernized, his heart pounded with anticipation. He had imagined this moment for years. What would he say if he saw her? He didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, Eli entered Calden & Co. as a potential buyer. He'd made an appointment using only his first name. No one questioned it. And then she walked out of the meeting room. Sophie, blonde hair neatly tied back, dressed in elegant business wear, her posture graceful and poised. She looked exactly as he remembered, yet so much more. But when their eyes met, there was no flicker of recognition. She didn't know him. "Hi there," she greeted warmly. "I'm Sophie. You must be Mr. Eli. Looking for a property near the park, right?" For a brief second, Eli's breath caught. The warmth in her voice was the same, but her eyes, they didn't see him. He nodded, masking the wave of emotion rising in his chest. Yes, something quiet, close to nature. And just like that, Eli made a choice. He wouldn't tell her, yet. He would start again, as a stranger, a client, a neighbor. Maybe, just maybe, she would find him again, on her own. Since returning to Willow Edge, Eli had found himself, accidentally, running into Sophie more often than coincidence should allow. A quiet morning at her favorite cafe, a walk through the park, a local art exhibit, where they stood together in front of a painting of a little wooden cabin hidden in the trees. "It feels like a memory," Sophie murmured. Eli just smiled. Each encounter led to deeper conversations. They talked about dreams, about loneliness, about the strange sense of emptiness that crept in during quiet nights. One crisp autumn afternoon, with the sky turning amber and gold, Eli spotted Sophie sitting beneath the old oak tree. She was tracing the bark with her fingers, lost in thought. Without a word, he walked over and sat beside her. "What brings you here today?" she asked softly, not looking at him. "I'm not sure," he replied. "Maybe this place has a way of calling people back." They sat in silence. No words were needed. Then the sky shifted, and the first drops of rain fell, soft at first, then suddenly heavier. They both stood up and, without thinking, ran. Their steps found rhythm and memory, leading them to the one place their hearts remembered: the old wooden cabin on the hill. It was still there, aged and moss-covered, but standing strong. Inside it was dim and damp, no electricity, no signal, only the sound of the rain and the soft glow of a phone's flashlight. Sophie shivered. Eli pulled off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "I used to come here when I was little," she whispered. "Someone once told me it was a secret place, just for two." Eli sat beside her, his heart racing. He couldn't bring himself to speak the truth, not yet. "Do you think we've met before?" he asked. She was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe. Being near you feels like remembering something I didn't know I'd forgotten." He looked at her, really looked, and then, slowly, he brushed a raindrop from her cheek. She closed her eyes. He kissed her. It started soft, gentle, unsure, then deepened into something neither of them had expected, but both had been aching for. And when the night wrapped around them, their breaths warm in the cold air, Eli reached into his coat. He took out a simple gold ring, the one he'd carried all these years, and gently slid it onto Sophie's finger as she slept beside him. No proposal, no words. Just a silent promise continuing where it had once been left behind. Morning light slipped through the cracked wooden walls, casting soft lines across Sophie's face as she opened her eyes. The air was still. Only the sound of wind and early birdsong filled the cabin. A man's shirt, faintly smelling of pine and warmth, wrapped around her, and on the ring finger of her left hand, a ring. Sophie froze. She stared at it for a long moment, her eyes blank, as if her mind couldn't quite process what it meant. Her lashes fluttered as she slowly sat up. Eli sat near the window, bathed in soft sunlight. He turned when he heard her stir, his expression gentle but laced with worry. "You're awake," he said quietly. "Maybe we should talk." Sophie didn't answer. She only looked at him, her blue eyes distant and unreadable. Eli swallowed hard, then moved closer, sitting across from her. "Sophie, there's something I've been holding in for a long time." She stayed silent. "I'm Eli," he said softly. "Eli Walker, the boy from your childhood." Her eyes blinked once. No denial, no confirmation. "I didn't have the courage to say it right away," Eli continued. "When I saw you again and you didn't recognize me, I thought maybe if you felt it in your heart first, it would be more real." Sophie looked down at the ring again, her lips pressed into a tight line. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. "I still have the bracelet you gave me," Eli said, voice unsteady. "I remember every little thing. You hated broccoli. You always split the last cookie in half. I've never stopped remembering you." Still, she said nothing. But Eli could feel something cracking inside her, something silent and deep, much like the ache in his own chest. Without a word, Sophie stood. She wrapped herself in the shirt, walked toward the door. Eli didn't try to stop her. He only watched, helpless, as if something vital inside him was slipping away. She stepped outside. The cold morning wind brushed her golden hair. She didn't look back. Eli stood alone once again, left with nothing but silence and a heart that felt just as empty. Sophie returned home just as the sky was beginning to brighten with dawn. Her steps were slow, heavy, as if she had left a part of her heart behind in that old wooden cabin. She didn't go to her room. Instead, she sat quietly in the kitchen, eyes fixed on nothing, her fingers absent-mindedly brushing against the ring still resting on her left ring finger. Her mother's footsteps echoed softly down the hallway. She paused in the doorway, holding a worn, yellowed envelope in her hand. "Sophie," she said gently, "there's something I should have given you a long time ago." Sophie looked up. Her mother placed the envelope on the table in front of her and quietly left the room without another word. Sophie opened it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was familiar, childlike, messy, but unmistakably sincere. "Sophie, I'm sorry I didn't get to say goodbye. My parents said we had to leave that night. I didn't want to go. I've hidden the bracelet you gave me in my wooden box. I'll take it with me. When I grow up, I'll come back to find you. I promise." Her vision blurred with tears. She read it again and again. He had kept his word. He had never forgotten. It wasn't him who failed to recognize the promise. It was her. She had doubted him, pushed him away, refused to see with her heart what her eyes couldn't confirm. And now she didn't know if she'd lost him all over again, or if it was still possible to find her way back. That afternoon, as the sun tilted westward, Sophie returned to the park, where everything had once begun. The old oak tree still stood tall and unshaken, just as it had all those years ago. Beneath its rough bark, the faint carving she once made was still visible. "I'm waiting. Remember our promise." She placed her hand gently on the trunk, closed her eyes. Her heart spun backward in time to a childhood filled with innocence and promises. "I knew you'd come back here," a quiet voice said behind her. Sophie turned. Illy stood a few steps away, the setting sun casting gold across his face and hair. He didn't look like a stranger anymore. The distance between them had dissolved. She didn't speak right away. Then softly, her voice thick with emotion, she said, "I read the letter." Eli nodded, stepping closer. "Your mother kept it for 13 years. "And I forgot," Sophie whispered. "Forgot the boy who used to sit right here, his eyes scrambling every time he had to read a sentence." He smiled. "And the little girl who drew a mountain, a fish, and the sun, just to help that boy understand a single word." Sophie laughed through her tears. "How could I not recognize you?" "You weren't blind," Eli said gently. "We've both grown. We've changed. But the promise, it never did." She looked at him for a long moment, then reached out and touched his face. "I remember now, Eli. All of it." He took her hand and placed it over his chest, where his heart thudded fast and full, as if it had been waiting for her all this time. Beneath the same oak tree where their story had started, wrapped in the colors of a fading sun, they embraced, not as children this time, but as two souls who had found their way back to each other after all the years apart. 2 days later, Eli sent Sophie a simple message. "West Hill, this evening, I have something to say." When Sophie arrived, the sun was sinking low, casting a golden glow over the valley. Eli stood near a sketch mounted on an easel, an architectural drawing of a small house with a white porch, a wooden fence, and an oak tree right in the center of the yard. "I started drawing this the day I saw you again," Eli said, his eyes fixed on hers. "Back then, I didn't know if I'd ever have the chance. But I hoped." Sophie stepped closer, gently running her fingers along the edge of the sketch. "The oak tree?" "Of course," Eli smiled. "It's where everything began." He turned and pulled something from his jacket pocket, a new ring, simple, elegant, with 2 tiny words engraved inside. "Come back." Then he knelt. "Sophie Bennett, will you build a life with me from the very place where we lost each other?" The evening breeze caught her hair. Sophie looked down at him, this boy who had once vanished in a storm and now returned not with apologies, but with a new promise. She held out her hand. "I never really stopped waiting for you, and now I choose to walk forward with you, not because of the past, but because of the future." Eli slipped the ring onto her finger, this time not in a daze, but with full clarity and all the love in his heart. And that, dear friend, was the story of Sophie and Eli, a story of waiting, of remembering, and of love that never truly let go. Sometimes life takes us away from the people we're meant to find, only to bring us back when we've grown enough to recognize them again. This wasn't just about romance, it was about promises, about the courage to believe and the quiet strength of hope. If you felt even a flutter of emotion, if a scene reminded you of someone or something you once cherished, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe for more heartwarming stories, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances. Until next time, take care of your heart, and never forget the promises that matter most.